So what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's been a little while since I've put out videos here on the channel. I've been head down focusing on DIBS. Some of you guys may have seen that. I have some content coming out soon about that, but I want to talk about what's happening with Bitcoin. I think it's really important for those who don't know, sort of what's going on the macro level at a big picture to understand, what's behind this rally, who's behind this rally, who's bought in, and how does this shaking out everything sort of happening globally, and how is the view on Bitcoin starting to change? So I have a couple topics over here that I want to run down and go through. So let's get into it. So will fiat go away? So my prediction, at least in the short to midterm, is no, definitely not, right? But what we're seeing at a really large scale is this mindset shift, right, of the narrative of Bitcoin as a replacement to gold, and probably a lot of the negative yielding debt that countries have, as well as bonds potentially. And what it's starting to look like is that Bitcoin is starting to eat the value of all of that, right? Obviously, what also I think can be seen on the markets is that those who are really big players and whales, as they say, are trying to still accumulate a large quantity of Bitcoin, and I think that they're hoping that obviously things don't get sort of to a level that they may never come back from. So what else is happening, right? So some of you guys are familiar with people like Michael Saylor. I really recommend listening to what he says. He's got a really interesting take. As somebody who wasn't in Bitcoin and even really a believer and understander of what was going on in such a short time, he's really leapfrogged to be, I think, one of the most clear-thinking people when giving his takes on what's going on with Bitcoin, right? Really, in a simple way, it's simple math, right? If you think about it, you have supply and demand, right? So Bitcoin is a fixed supply, right? Not only is there never going to be more than 21 million Bitcoin, but yes, is there a small number of Bitcoin that's created each day as mining rewards that funds the network? Yes. Is that even really relevant at this point? Not really, right? Miners are selling, but eventually I think we're going to see that flip where miners are going to stop selling, because as the anticipation of where price is probably going to go as things continue to progress, that I'm going to explain here on the list, you're going to see them selling even less, right? And so even right now, at any given time, there's really at most only about 3 to 4 million of Bitcoin that is what's called floating. Essentially, when you go on exchanges to either buy or sell Bitcoin, really, like I said, only 3 to 4 million, which would be about 15 to 20, at most 25% of the total supply of Bitcoin, is really up for grabs. So if there is really large surges in demand, there's only so much Bitcoin to go around, because many people who have it aren't selling it, right? If you have your Bitcoin stuck away in cold storage, you're not selling, right? So when people want to come to the exchange, they're buying that Bitcoin. And again, if the supply is much smaller than demand, right, I think essentially basic math can take over at that point, right? So you have interest rates near zero. You have countries, I've almost said companies, you have countries like the US, about to do another $2 trillion stimulus, with most of it not really going, where it should be going, which is directly into the hands of people. And the U.S. is just one country on that list. There's many other countries that are printing money, expanding their monetary supply. And what happens over and over is that as monetary supply expands, the value of highly sought after, quality, scarce assets goes up first, because those who have money want to park that money in something that you're not making more of, or at least, like we said, it's scarce, and there isn't the ability as easy as you have with fiat to just flood the market with new supply. So you start to see things like real estate go up, quality real estate, high-end stocks, quality scarce assets like Bitcoin, other maybe fixed supply cryptos that people have faith and trust in. And again, even things like gold, historically, obviously we haven't seen gold really make the same kind of run, and there's probably a lot of reasons for that. I mean, obviously at the end of the day with gold, and this is what's shifting out even larger on the larger narrative with Bitcoin, is if you own 10 pounds of gold, which would be a lot of gold, how much gold do you own relative to how much gold exists? And you don't have the answer to that question. I don't have the answer to that question. The effective supply of gold increases somewhere between 2, sometimes and up to maybe 4% a year of new gold entering the market, right? And if you look at the relationship between miners who mine real gold versus miners in Bitcoin, right? If the price of gold surges and goes crazy, miners are highly incentivized to work double time, work overtime, make more gold, and then sell that gold onto the market. Thus, again, limiting maybe the upside potential of the price of gold because you have this ability to generate new gold and dump it onto the market. If the price of Bitcoin continues to go up, miners have no further ability of generating more Bitcoin just because of that surge. The same amount is still there created. Of course, that same amount derived against dollars would be a larger USD amount. But again, I think that metric will become probably less and less relevant over time as monetary supply continues to inflate worldwide, right? So you have companies that are losing 15% of the value on their cash year over year right now, right, with monetary supply. So if you're just holding $1 million in cash as a business, year over year, if you're scaling this out, that same $1 million may have the same buying power as $850,000. So when you're a CEO of a major company and it's your job to protect capital for the long haul so that your company has the resources that they need, you're stuck with a tough decision of what do I do? Do I buy bonds that are yielding me pretty much near zero? And a number of other things that people may or may not do with that money, apart from investing back into the company to grow future revenue streams. These things, we're hitting this harsh reality that those gains, the loss because of monetary supply inflating, are going to be hard for a lot of people to overcome, because if cash is losing 15% of its value year over year, and you're earning 12%, you're actually losing 3% of your buying power, so you're net negative 3%. And you do that, for certain companies where they're holding tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, and you're talking about absolutely significant amounts of money. So it's very interesting to see, more and more companies like the MicroStrategies, like what we saw with Tesla, starting to make, and there's tons of other companies that have done this. The publicly traded ones, or the non-publicly traded companies, have no direct incentive and legal obligation to go out and tell everybody that they're doing that, right? The companies that are publicly traded and are in the public eye have to disclose that. So that's why you saw, again, the MicroStrategies, the Teslas of the world disclose that. There's a ton of other companies that aren't publicly traded that are starting to do this that haven't announced this yet. I'd be willing to bet that there's even very, very prominent people who are doing this as well themselves, and these people aren't going to go out and say anything else themselves either, right? They have no obligation as personal people to disclose that they're holding Bitcoin, although there may be a time when that matters, and they probably should, right? I think when we're in this world where there's 100 different voices, many of which are controlled, and they don't want people to understand really what's going on and how to maybe protect themselves, and buying a piece of this rock that is unmesswithable, right? If you have your value in Bitcoin, that's your value. People can't just take that value from you. And again, it's a life raft out in the ocean. If you're drowning, you want to grab something stable where you can actually hold on, because everything else around is, money is just ice melting in your hands, right? Forgive the rant. I'm running down the list. I'm going to keep going. So you have the mayor of Miami, who has done amazing moves as far as incorporating Bitcoin into the city's treasury, even giving people the option to be paid in it. This is incredible. I really recommend checking out the short interview he did with Axios, and the way he flipped it on, kind of a very mainstream reporter who's saying, isn't it dangerous? And just really just going with that narrative and, the speculation, and saying, isn't it volatile? I mean, volatility is life. You want volatility. If there's no volatility, there's no action, right? Obviously, as Bitcoin's market cap continues to grow, you're going to see volatility fall down with that rise. But this is amazing. I think this is just the first of many cities, states, and countries that are going to jump in and do something very similar to what Miami's doing, for obvious reasons. Then you have the PayPals of the world. One of the interesting points I put here is if you think about it, right? PayPal is now offering custody for Bitcoin and even the ability to buy it, right? And if PayPal is offering the ability to buy Bitcoin, that means that PayPal needs to have Bitcoin to sell people, right? So you got to imagine they, as a company, were buying a ton of Bitcoin to be able to meet that demand. And as that demand stays neutral or increases, they're going to probably continue to be a larger buyer in the market. I think that we're going to see a very similar thing happen with Apple on the wallet app directly on iPhones that will have support for Bitcoin and maybe some other cryptos. But again, Apple would be losing out on a tremendous amount of transaction volume and value if they didn't offer the ability to buy Bitcoin through the app. So that means probably same thing. Apple's going to need to buy Bitcoin to have Bitcoin to sell it to people, right? And then one of the last things that's really cool, I think that, again, this is something I learned from Michael Saylor and listening to him, is this mindset shift on how people are looking at Bitcoin, right? So if Bitcoin continues to be and eventually becomes exactly what everybody, who really understands what's going on thinks it's going to be, it's really going to be a mindset shift about how people operate with Bitcoin, right? Because if you buy Bitcoin and it appreciates and you sell it for a profit, you would need to pay tax on that profit, right? And that could be capital gains, right? If you got Bitcoin as income and you sold it, you could have income tax as well. But the way that a lot of the wealthiest people historically look at really high quality assets is they borrow against it, right? You borrow against it knowing this is a high quality asset that is not going anywhere, because that you at least have a high stability and level of confidence that asset's value is going to not only be there but increase over time. If you borrow against it, there's no income tax because borrowing a loan against it isn't income and it isn't capital gains. And so what a lot of people see playing out, and I think Michael Saylor, like I said, is probably the best person to listen to this particular discussion on about never selling your Bitcoin, is just borrow against it, right? And I think some of the biggest players in the world that are corporations, states, governments, entities, and even individuals understand this, and that is how they're looking at it. So when that starts to happen at a macro level at scale globally, and some of the biggest holders of Bitcoin decide, I have no desire or obligation to sell this, I'll just borrow against it if I need the cash, but apart from that, I'm storing my value here, totally flips the supply and demand, stock to flow of what's going on, and really, again, will lead to a further scarcity of supply. And if demand stays where it's at or increases, price essentially has no choice but to go up because of laws of basic math and nature. I hope this video was informative for you guys. I know it was a rant on a couple points that are pretty interesting. I am going to start making content super regularly here on the channel again. Thank you guys so much. Smash the like button and hit subscribe if you haven't. Comment below if you guys want me to talk about some other things. Other than that, thank you. Have an awesome day.